Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Strike a Light podcast from the Light Review. And it's a very special day today. We have a guest. We have our good friend Dan Griffiths, Technical Operations Manager at the LIA. And we're here because the I is relevant, though I nearly slipped in there. It's a month today. This is going to put a date on this. It's a month today before we hit the ICEL 2026 conference, where we will all be talking about emergency lighting, and it will be terribly, terribly exciting, won't it, Dan?
100%, yes. 100%.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. Okay, so to get this thing kicked off, then, Dan, give us a bit of a clue as to what we'll all be enjoying on the 10th of September at the Cavendish Conference Centre in London, W1, just in case anybody doesn't know where it's happening.
Thank you for that perfect plan.
That's all right.
Yeah, so I'm really excited for this year. So this will be the fourth year in the ICEL conference now. So it's like a known entity for a lot of people, but we've really tried to structure the program slightly different this year. Really trying to look a bit more at some of the how-tos, a little bit more as well. So last year was quite standards focused, because obviously there's a lot of change in the standards last year. So really kind of helping people get up to speed of what they kind of need to know as these things develop. This year, it's really kind of look at things from different perspectives. So from a fire risk, fire assessment officer's perspective of how do they actually define what is the best escape routes, to really kind of help people understand that, because that's often the things that we never understand, and we might get a drawing and go, why have you put that there? That makes no sense to me. But obviously, we've never been to the building. We just look at it in a 2D format, as well as how to actually apply lighting design in some areas. The fun topic of the new 5-year verification, and maybe some practical guidance around that, because that is a complication, I think, for most in the industry. So we're looking at how we can kind of help people do that, and just how to actually apply emergency in some of these areas, whether it's 24/7 high occupancy areas, stadiums, let's just say, like how to actually design emergency when you've got 80,000 people about to walk through. So we're really trying to get that how-to approach and why, understanding why. So there might be some stuff on adaptive signs around why and how, rather than just this is what the standard says and say it to do it.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, Chris and I are sitting here as a pair of designers who care about emergency lighting, which maybe puts us in a minority. Taking that kind of focus actually does bring the activity of the designer into a sharper focus. Now, we've talked about this before, but are you doing more to try and encourage the design community, if you like? And I'm talking about the aesthetic-based design community rather than the engineering-based design community, who I think are already on board. Is there anything we can do to get those guys, more of us into the room?
I think that's a good point. So yeah, I think some of the things that we're looking at with that is, as you said, so ICEL has always been a wider industry event. It's not a manufacturer-centric event, so it's always trying to keep people up to speed. I think we're trying to toe the line between the two, if I'm perfectly honest with you. So we're still trying to get some key updates, as with the verification, some things around competency still, some things around some of the general design principles that suit everyone, but then some of the other areas, as you said, particularly if we go into architectural lighting design, if we put it that way, then you've got to. Everyone knows my passion is heritage. I love give me a church, give me an old building. That's what I would want to like. Give me that any day. But if it's something you've got to put emergency light in, and the beautiful thing working at the LIA is we have the most random conversations sometimes, where someone sparks a question and you end up in a tangent. And we were talking about this of, one of my favourite castles, Warwick Castle. I'm like, well, how would you do the emergency lighting up the staircase? Because it's a one-way staircase to the roof and a one-way staircase down. So it's definitely going to need it. How would you do that? I don't know. Oh, well, that's probably a good talk. But it's trying to think of things like that. So it could be from that architectural side of, you don't want to go put a bunch of emergency lighting bulkheads on a wall. So how do you get your emergency lighting into a space? And we're also trying to widen that, because although it's important for the architectural community, also from the services community, your facility managers, they're often the ones replacing it as well if something fails. So or if it's 5, 6, 8 years down the line and they just need a new one, how do they know what they can put up without them just going and asking for whatever? So we're really trying to find that balance, I think, with the conference as it kind of grows and develops.
Chris, do you want to have a chat about the way that we are having to face situations where the code is sort of driving design one way, but the realities on the ground don't actually, like a stone, spiral staircase in a castle. The standards and the reality don't actually fit. I mean,
that's a general rule of thumb, right? I don't think I've ever done a job where all the information I need is there at the start, and that would just be a miracle, wouldn't it? If it came there, you'd think, what's happened here? I don't understand, because I've got everything I need, or I can just get on with the design work. I mean, it's madness. So you end up unfortunately, it just drives you down a certain path, and that pathway is you overlight it, and it's the only safe way to deal with it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because the light levels are quite low anyway, but I always allow for a little bit of extra light, because you don't know what's in the ceiling behind the voids, and they may not be able to put that light exactly where it needs to be. And it's such fine margins, aren't there? I mean, you would have done calculations for emergency lighting, and you move it like half a meter and it doesn't work. You're like, oh, blimey, that's not right. So you just have to give that little extra light just to ensure that it does comply, because you know that perhaps they won't be able to put it where it needs to go. But I was really impressed last year, because it did clarify, it did sort of get rid of a lot of ambiguity with all the new regs and stuff that you brought in. Is that something that this year is less about new things that have happened, but more about the application, I guess, is what you're saying?
Yeah, more clarity, I think. So two things really on the clarity of it. Because as you said, standards are there built for a perfect world. This is what we should do. But in reality, like you said, sometimes you can't. If you've got a big concrete pillar in the way, no matter what you want to do, it's not going there. So you have to move it. But also, there's some things wrote in the standard. It's probably the transformation of ICEL over the next few years, as well of providing practical guidance rather than just be what the standard says. Because the standard says only gets you so far. You need to understand the standard, but then you need to be able to apply common sense. So that's kind of where we're shaping it. So we're doing some on adaptive signs, because adaptive signs, generally speaking, people have heard about it, people understand it. How do people actually test it? It's probably something that people don't understand, and they probably panic about. Well, what if this sign fails? How do I test an adaptive sign? So trying to give a bit more context of how they actually work is quite an important one. We're also within the program as well, we're going to be looking at some of those areas. So I mentioned the verification as an example that's now in 5266. So every 5 years you should do a verification. But the practicality of actually doing that is very, very difficult. I can understand it's got best practice, but to strip a room out of everything, black everything out, to calibrate, it looks to me to start trying to get that right it's going to be hard work. So, okay, well, practically that's best practice, but what can we do? Like, what is some sensible outcomes of that? And that only comes from anecdotal evidence of designers, truthfully, of, look, here's the problems I face. This is how we overcome it. And there's some other things that we're trying to do to help that. Bringing back spacing tables a lot more is a good example of that, because at least you've got some sort of verification system. Like you said there, Chris, you move it half a meter, it doesn't work. But if I have a spacing table accompany that, I can see it is off. I can see everything within a parameter. Okay, well, okay still. It might not be perfect. It might not be exactly as the standard says, but it's what can work. Obviously, being good photometry with that. It's another thing, good spacing table. But so there's still some standard elements, but it's really trying to give clarity on some of the areas a little bit more, where They can be great, or they'll just be ignored because people go, well, I'm not doing that.
The weird thing with emergency is it's very binary, isn't it? It's like if there's one part of lighting that really relies on numbers, this is it, because the rest of it there's a little bit of wiggle room for most of the stuff, but if you don't meet a certain level of light, then it just doesn't work, and that's it. And it's strange because when it comes to deviations, so that there's a weird space, and that you might not be able to light it in a conventional manner. You just do a deviation, and then you hope. It's like a sort of roll of the dice, isn't it? You hope that the person at the other end, the fire safety officer or whatever, he's going to accept that deviation, or the client's going to accept. So it's like an element of not risk, but unknown, which is a bit weird, isn't it? Because you go from something completely binary to something that is just, he could have had a bad day. And he looks at it and says, I'm not passing that. Or he could have had a lovely day. It's a sunny day outside. He's just been down the beach. And you're like, I'm going to pass that. And I don't know what the process behind that is, because you approach it from a logical point of view, and you can justify it in your head because you've written a deviation because of that. But then it gets to the other end and you think, where does it go from there? Because it could be the matter of fail or pass, couldn't it? That's a weird one for me. That is weird. I mean, we have to, I suppose we've got a set of parameters we have to go towards, but that last thing is, who knows?
Yeah. I think, Dan, there's another one associated with that. It's something that Chris and I are currently going through on a project. That sort of back in the day, there was an assumption that you're talking about spacing and photometrics, that there was a sort of a general approach to light falling out the face of a fitting, and it did what it did. And it didn't matter whether it was company A or company B or company C. It was all much of a muchness. But the more we move towards focused LED fittings, the tiny little downlighters and those, there is no standard on those, is there? I mean, every company does what they do. So you are going to do a scheme based on a fixture from company A. Company B is invited in to do a cost comparison, probably. But it's not the same thing, because you've now got a different distribution from their fittings. So it's actually so. Are we really suggesting that if you want 3 tender prices, you're going to do 3 emergency lighting designs on a big commercial building, and that's there's an unreality there, and the deviations that Chris is talking about, I think, come into play on that. In that scheme A, it complies. Scheme B almost complies, but it's 10% the wrong way. And at what point you go, we're just going to have to accept that. And I think all of that is just up in the air, isn't it?
I think I think you both someone on 2 good points, Chris. As you said, it is probably the most binary thing that needs the most common sense applied to it, which normally are the 2 things that go against each other. They're opposing magnets, shall we say. And then, like you said, John, a means of measurement is very difficult on, something could be company A. You want to look at company B, but how do you know company B is good? So fluorescent days, spacing tables were great. It was what you compared everything was. Like, here's my bulkhead, right? How have you made your diffuser? What ridges have you built into? What have you built in it to kind of maximise that space as much as you could on so many emergency products, particularly? Like, this is how I could do it. And then it's really kind of trying to build those things back in, and that's obviously just on standalone, let alone integrated. That's the whole other subject. Of trying to have a way, because my fear always is, and this is where ICEL is trying to be a lot more practical. The perfect scenario is always the perfect scenario. We all get that you would always use company A. Company A is what's installed. Fine. 8 years down the line, a fitting fails. 6 years down the line, a fitting fails. You have to put a new fitting in. Company A product might not be available anymore. I need to put a company B product in. Now, in an ideal world, you'll go redesign the whole thing and you make sure it's fully compliant. But that's not the world that we live in. So that's where spacing tables do work well. Of, okay, well, I've got this fit in. These are its spacing dates, details. What's the spacing from that fitting? What's the spacing from that? All right, it should work. Is it the best solution? 100% not. But is it better than someone just going to buy company B, company C, company D, and just putting it out? Because that's the reality of what's going to happen. So I think that's where we're trying to apply common sense a little bit more to help members of, C&D is going to happen on a maintenance thing, because that is, if you can't get what you used to have, that's what's going to happen. But then how can those people, rather than criticize those people, how can we make it easier for those people to actually know what they should be looking for? And I think that's the challenge.
I'd redirect them to this this podcast.
Better, yeah.
Because it is but it's true to say that, I mean, everyone wants easy solutions, don't they, to complex problems? And if it's really easy just to say, "Oh, just swap it out for another product," that's what people want to hear, and it's that difficulty in saying, "Well, you probably can't do that," or "You can do that, but here's the ramifications." That would be really interesting to see some legal text that says you can do this X, but this is what's going to happen Y. That's something that I'd love to see from yourselves, I guess. The route to market when you want to do a change.
Yeah. Well, I think that there might be an opportunity here for a bit of a, dare I say, a cultural existential shift, because we seem to be coming through a decade or more of this is right and that's wrong, that binary approach. And if it's wrong, it's very wrong, and if it's right, it's very right. And we know that the truth is usually floating around in the middle of all of that. Now, if we can get back to that position that goes, what do they say? Don't chuck out the good for the sake of chasing the excellent. If you can get the excellent, that's fine, but the good is good enough.
Voltaire. That was Voltaire, wasn't it?
Was it?
Not exactly what you said, but it was Voltaire.
No, he would have said it in French, Chris, I think, probably.
I'm not going to say it in French, am I? That would be crazy. I wouldn't know it in French. What is the expression?
Well, you raised it. You know, I didn't expect. Did he say that?
Voltaire. Sorry.
He's the best in the best of all possible worlds. And that was the other guy. Pangloss.
I think that is the challenge of it, though. I think...
haul it back. Let's stay away from French classical literature. Yeah, let's talk about Clockwork Orange then, Dan.
Let's do it. I don't know what the most like in that film, in their milk bowl, but I think that's where we're trying to be sensible. So ICEL has always been very straight-lined, hard and fast for many years. And I think, so we have some plans for ICEL over the next 2-3 years of kind of potentially broadening ICEL a little bit more to get some feedback in, because we have competency schemes, we have other things, but you need external engagement, but they've got to feel a buy-in of what there is. And sometimes it is those practical things of, like you said, value engineering is always going to be value engineering. As you said, Chris, like you can't really get away from that. You can just hope it's going to be good and they've at least thought about it. Post-Building Safety Act, that they've at least made sure what they've put in is suitable. It's the repairs and renewals and replacements on site normally that's a challenging one for people that I fully accept that you're always going to be a bit limited by what you can do, what information can you actually get of that product. And that's sometimes a challenge, but I think it's where we can provide that practical solution so that maybe it's not excellent, but it is good. Because in the absence of a practical solution, people will just do what they want. And they need to understand what they're doing, and they need to understand the ramifications of what they're doing. But at least have something that is good. I would love to, like, if I put my LIA governance hat on, it's black and white. It should always be to the standard, and you should never deviate away from it. If I put my practical head on, I understand that sometimes that isn't feasible, and you have to do what you can do sometimes.
I think it's interesting that looking at the program, we used to, as you said, we used to conferences talking to the engineers who are actually putting the schemes together and telling them the latest thing that they need to know. This program seems to be much more about the, so you right there, human behaviour. And the humans are the people using the space, the people who are controlling the space, the people who are paying for the space, the people who are installing the space. And that thing about humanity, which is not a binary thing, because we can never assume that the logic is going to be as simple as that. And I think that for the conference is going to be very exciting. I wonder if it's actually going to scare people, in a way. It's one thing to say, I just open the book and I look for the numbers and then I do the scheme and then away it goes. And Chris spends more time bending my ear, asking about where are the pull cords and where are the fire extinguishers going and where's this and where's that. How the hell do I know? Go and talk to the client, because they don't know either. And
no
so
that's the problem.
100%.
And yet
like you said, beginning.
They want a fully compliant scheme. They want everything to work, but they don't want to give you the information, and that's really irritating. And then when you say, well, actually, John's quite good like this, because he'll just say, we sort of know where they are, so let's just guess that they're there. But my
Thanks,
my
Chris.
mind works in the same way, that just says they're just going to take that and go, oh, that works then, and just forget all the bits where we said that doesn't work. We're just taking an estimate. Someone's going to come along and they're just going to do that thing where they scan through and they go, oh, here's an emergency scheme. Oh, that's done and dusted. We could just move on and just forget everything. Because I just, it's not that I distrust people, but there's a fair amount of laziness, or people that just don't want to do it. And then you just end up holding the can, because it's fine when you do it and then it's issued. And then 5 years down the line, when there's a fire or something, and the person on that, they're like, oh, right, who was that? It was Chris. And he said it was all right. So where is Chris? Why can't I find him? Where's his number? So it's that call in the middle of the night where you say, did you look at the stuff? Or we said, this is just a preliminary thing because we don't have... They'll be like, no, we just looked at your design. Thanks very much. See you in court.
I think that is the risk of... And when we were planning the conference, that was one of the things that we were talking about, of common misconceptions or common challenges, really. But I don't think I think the challenge is people don't appreciate the importance of emergency lighting design, and we can keep banging that drum. But I think the challenge is having that detail. So that's why we really wanted to get a fire risk assessor, particularly. Well, we've got to talk on wiring regs at the same, because it's not something we ever cover. But just as important, because you can put the best scheme, if you put it with the wrong cables, you're knackered. But from a fire risk perspective, really understanding how that is there. And exactly what you talk about in my previous role, always used to be, here's an indicative layout based on this being your escape route, based on this is where these things will be. But you must send us over a drawing to confirm all this so we can sign off a design. Then someone would ask for a design certificate. And I'd be like, no, I can't. One, I would pay for credited. I'm like, I can't sign anything off because you haven't gave me X, Y, Z. And you just don't hear from them again. And that is and probably will forever be a challenge, because when people don't know how to get the information, sometimes they just ignore and is the easier choice.
Yeah, it's the easiest way of it's like a river, isn't it? It always finds the easiest path.
Yeah,
and it's not a bad thing, but maybe we need a bigger stick.
But that's it, isn't it? I mean, we do need a bigger stick. We need the stick of someone going around at the end of a job and going, I don't think you intended to do that because it's not working properly. So can you go back and make it work properly, please? Because I'm not going to sign off the building. Because if we're all marking our own homework, which is effectively what we're doing, regardless of what the regs say, we are all marking our own homework because we're all complicit in all of this. We haven't got that person, that police person on the outside going, can I see your scheme? Can I see the installation? Can I see your test data? And Dan, until we've got something like that, but that's what we used to have. Again, a cultural shift again in understanding that you're not going to. There seems to be an assumption that people do things well, and that's what they're for. We're here to do things well, and then buildings burn down, and you realise that all the people who you thought were doing things well were just doing things in order to cut corners, make profit, do anything other than provide building safety or personal safety.
Challenge in the industry, John. You were at TechX last year, TechX 2025, and we were fortunate enough to have a keynote speaker in Ricky Nuttall, who's
scariest, most emotional talk I've ever sort of sat through, really.
And I'll be honest, we were thinking about putting them on to kick off ICEL again. this year, we might in future years, because it really does set the scene of, pardon my language, but the factor of, yeah, no, this is a big deal. And I don't like chucking Grenfell, because everywhere you go, Grenfell always gets chucked around. And I feel like we're just kind of knocking a tragedy about it. But he was very honest about his own experiences, not just what happened to obviously the victims, but the survivors as well, which is something I never thought of. But he talked about his own experience with the emergency lighting there, which, you know, where the emergency lights were placed, so you couldn't see the floor numbers, where they'd come back. Just so they had to go into each floor, find the room numbers on a door so they could find and feel it in the smoke so they could know where they are. So it took them a long time. You know, it's a sad story. They got so many floors up and had to come back down before they tried to go back in a few more times. And you don't want tragedies to happen, and they can happen and will happen. And it's the small things that don't seem bad. Actually, when you add them all up to that scenario, yes, the cladding was awful, but there's so many other things that really add to it. But I suppose the challenges at the moment, unfortunately, the Building Safety Act come out, everyone's in support of the Building Safety Act. I know I attended an event not long ago where the planners were actually quite negative against the Building Safety Act because it slows down their planning a lot. But the compliant ones, they were really annoyed. It was actually a really annoying thing for them, for some of the architects and the planners of buildings, because it's added about another year onto their development. And they could have been doing everything right. So it's from that side, that's good. But obviously, we also know there's been a downturn in building safety regulators for control officers. At the same time as more scrutiny has been put on it. So it's that priority, it's that funding, it's that focus. But then it's also giving people something tangible to go check. And I think that sometimes is the hardest thing of, it's not emergency focus, but we're doing the same thing with Part L, energy conservation and controls at the moment, because you want a building control officer to go in and make sure your controls are doing it. Well, how do you check? It's a bit the same with emergency lighting. Other than checking that they come on, you're not going to get someone walking around, a regulator walking around every X amount of years going, oh, right, okay, let me just strip all the environment out here. Let me black out all the windows. Let me stick a lux meter down. So we do need some common sense approaches for people. And we almost need to think inwardly, outwardly, of how can we actually help these people address if something's safe or not, rather than say they need to do more without telling them how to do more.
I think you've just hit it. I think that's the nail that you've just hit. It's keeping people safe. It's not about sort of design standards. It's not about signing schemes off. It's about, is it safe? Is it safe? I go back to when I first went out as an independent light designer, working for a big brewery, doing scheme design, and I was being chased around by the fire officer for the day. And I said, "Oh, come on, you know." And he just looked at me and he said, "People die in places like this." It's all he needed to say, really. And then again, every month we run an open mic session in one of the local village pubs, and at the back of the room, behind the staged area, there's the fire exit, which I desperately try to keep clear. And then you turn your back and someone's put their amplifier against it. And then there's another amplifier, then there's a guitar bag, and then there's this. Nobody looks. And unless there's somebody like me who is particularly sensitized to it, just say, can you not do that, please? It's raising that to say something might happen. And we would like to think that if something does happen, we've done all the best that we could to keep people safe. I'm looking at the clock, and we're just about hitting the half hour, and I think that's been that it goes too quick, doesn't it? I know. Right, I'm just going to do a reprise on this. We have been talking emergency lighting, and the reason we've been talking emergency lighting today is that 1 month today, on the 10th of September 2026, we have the now annual ICEL conference at the lovely Cavendish Conference Centre in London W1. Are they in Cavendish Mews or something like that? Just off Harley Street. Anyway, we all know where they are. Dan will be there answering all kinds of questions like, where's the toilet and things like that, because he's He's very good at things like that.
Downgraded him there a little bit, didn't you, John? Not
Chris
where they are first.
Chris and I might well be there doing a little bit of I don't know, a little bit of audio recording work or even video recording work. Who knows what'll happen? But the team will all be there. So I would like to thank Dan Griffiths for joining us today. Always great fun. I'd like to thank Chris for being here as ever on our Strike a Light podcasts. Duncan's behind the scenes, making sure that everything works, and we trust that everything doesn't work. And we will see you out there. And now Chris is going to sign off with what he signs off with every time.
Don't forget to like and share. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments, because you are our clients. So please let us know what you think. And Apple Podcast, YouTube, check us out there.
See what he did there? Fantastic. See you on the 10th of September.